Groundwater flooding is difficult to understand, it's hardly monitored, and it's often forgotten. On top of all this, the longer we ignore it, the worse it's going to get. Now more than ever, it's essential we support the development of tools and response frameworks to help safeguard our communities. So groundwater flooding is underrepresented in the flood community for several reasons. It's the least invested in, it's the least well understood, it's the least well monitored, and it's really poorly responded to. It's kind of invisible, right? It comes up slowly, it's the water table, it doesn't create drama, it doesn't really make it to the TV, and that makes it hard to understand and hard to keep a track of. Groundwater flooding is uniquely challenging for a few reasons. The first is probably duration. If you compare it to other types of flooding, once the water table is high, it will sit there for days, weeks, sometimes months, depending on the location. The second thing I think is unusual about it is where it can appear. Because it's following the geology and the water table, it can mean that you can have water appear in places you don't expect it, halfway up a hill, at an old spring, for example. So it's quite hard to make decisions if you don't have the data to base those decisions on. And the data for groundwater flooding is remarkably lacking. To give an example, there's no freely available national groundwater flood risk maps. Now, there are flood risk maps for pretty much every other source of flooding, and they're freely available and pretty good. It's kind of hard to understand the problem itself because it's complex and it happens underground primarily. You can't see it. On Project Groundwater, we want to address the lack of awareness, understanding, and also forecasting of groundwater flood risk. We're developing a new flood warning system which will have innovative things about it as well as looking at groundwater flood risk. So once we can show that it works on a local level here on the project, we'll be then pushing for this to be rolled out more widely and on a national basis. Local and risk management authorities can do a few things to better deal with and better tackle groundwater flood risk. You're talking about a scale of a water table affecting the whole water table, affecting just a small area of community. Now, to engineer your way out of that is not easy, and you won't get the funding for it. It won't be easy to justify the scale of expense you'd need to do. But what you want to do is try and build resilience within a community to flooding. And at the moment, the funding system doesn't really gear you up to doing that. It doesn't support that type of scheme. So we're hoping to build examples of how you can increase resilience and then also make the case for how the funding system should be changed so that it can support this kind of work going forward.